So what are you afraid of? It's an interesting question for our time because in these days there's so much fear everywhere. There's fear around sickness, there's fear around loss of freedom through restrictions, there's fear of what other people around us may think of us. I think so many of us are afraid to have open and real conversations with each other because we're just afraid to be judged. We're just afraid of what other people will think of our decisions. We're afraid of being excluded, or we're afraid of being ridiculed or pushed aside or being thought of as being weak or foolish or whatever it might possibly be. There's so much fear all over the place. And again, I'm a person who can struggle with fear at the best of times, and so I find this season interesting. I was struck the other day by the words from Isaiah chapter 8. In Isaiah chapter 8, beginning in verse 11, we read these words. This is what the Lord says to me with his strong hand upon me, warning me not to follow in the ways of this people. Do not call conspiracy everything this people calls a conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear, and do not dread it. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread. And I find this an interesting perspective. Again, when I read these words, it just sort of resonated in my soul. There's something intense in this thought, that we should be people who are profoundly different. We should not follow in the ways of the culture around us. Because all around us there is so much fear of so many different kinds of things. But God is calling us back to a healthy perspective of who He is, that He is the one who is holy. He is the one who is strong and mighty and sovereign over everything else. He is the one who can easily deal with all kinds of sickness and disease and darkness and dread. He's overcome death in all of its fullness. He's the one who raises people up to positions of power and removes them. He is the one who rules sovereignly over all things. There is nothing and there is no one that can stand in the way of God's presence. And even through the dark and difficult seasons of life, God does powerful and redemptive things. There's nothing outside of His ability to control or to redeem. It's an interesting thought that we shouldn't fear everything the people around us fear, but we should have a healthy, holy fear of God, a healthy, holy respect for who He is, which means that I should be and that you should be more concerned about what God thinks of us than what the people around us thinks of us. That we should be more concerned about knowing God and pursuing Him. We should be more concerned about holiness and justice and faithfulness and truth and mercy and grace and peace and compassion and the mission of God in the world than we are about our own circumstances, our own spaces, about what's happening or may happen someday in the future. That God is the one we should live for. He is the one that our perspective should be on. He is the one that we should find a deep sense of delight in. He is the one that we should pursue. And so in this day and this space, in this season, if you're wrestling with fear, as I know I do at various different times in this space, the very best thing that we can do is again turn our attention onto God, to remember the wonder of who He is, to allow the goodness of His presence, of His truth, of His redemptive grace and mercy to reshape our perspective of the present, and to be people who are consumed with a desire to follow Him, and not people who are consumed with fear. And so instead of being focused on our own circumstances, or uncertainty about the future, or uncertainty about how things are going with the people around us, that we would be people who pursue holiness, who pursue purity, who pursue righteousness, who pursue the fruit of the Spirit in love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. Who are people powerfully committed to the movement and the work of God in the world around us, that many people would come to know Him and follow Him and experience the fullness of life in relationship with Jesus. Again, let's be a people who pursue God, who live every day with a healthy, holy respect for who He is, instead of living with a sense of dread at the world around us. May God continue to bless and keep and guide us and form us to be this people. God bless you.